Building Better Humans with AI, Part 1. So this week, I'm launching a brand new thing. That's right, folks, a brand new thing. And this brand new thing is the culmination of much of my life's work. And let me tell you a little bit about how we got here before I actually talk about it. So this is going to be video 1 of this week. And let's just start at the very, very beginning. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a Greek-Canadian immigrant household. And my dad was from an island off the coast of Athens called Andros. And he was from a tiny little village in the middle of that island called Arni. And my mom was from a suburb of Athens, and they both met in Canada, and they got married in Canada, and they decided to stay in Canada, and they had us, and we lived in the east side of Toronto, in a neighborhood called Scarborough, in a suburb called Scarborough, which is, we basically grew up maybe like 2 or 3 blocks away from where Mike Myers grew up. You know Mike Myers, famous actor. So I mean, there was a video once where he was walking around his old neighborhood, and I thought, wow, I recognize all of those buildings. So we weren't a very rich family. We weren't middle class. We were hardworking. It was a hardworking immigrant family. My dad worked in restaurants with his brother, and we got by as much as we could get by. And I can remember, ever since I was a kid, I loved to read. Reading was amazing. I loved to read because it helped me to escape, and it wasn't like our life was horrible. My dad was pretty super strict, but our life wasn't horrible. It wasn't awful. But it was cold winters, it was school, it was other people. I was kind of an introvert, and to some degree, I still am kind of introvert, if you don't understand that. So what I used to do is I used to love to read. And the stuff that really sparked my imagination was science fiction. So I would find every science fiction novel I could read, whether it was a periodical with analog science fiction magazines or from the library, and I would just devour it. I would devour it. I would read it. I would imagine it. I would love to live in that future world. And I would do things like lights would be out, under the covers, get one of those old flashlights, and I remember the old flashlight was an old silver flashlight with the D batteries in it, and I would get my science fiction novels, and I would set up a little tent under the covers, put the flashlight on, and read and read and read and imagine these amazing futures. So when Star Trek came out, I was a perfect fan for that show because it showed me a positive future. Now, let's step back for a second. So in these science fiction novels, some of them, and this was in sort of late 60s or so, and things were in turmoil. And a lot of science fiction authors decided to use science fiction to be able to explain how this world could change, how it could be different. And some went the dystopian route, and some went the utopian route. And the one that really twigged on me was Star Trek, because Star Trek went in a utopian direction. I was always an optimist. I always looked at the positive side of things. No matter what, I was always an optimist. And here I was, presented with an optimistic vision of the future. A vision of the future where we all work together for the greater good, and we had amazing technology that would help us make our way through space, live better lives, do new things. So I was totally enraptured with this technology. I was enraptured with this future world, this optimistic future world that we could build for ourselves. And I'll bet you anything, I'm not the only one. There's probably millions upon millions of people out there who were huge fans of Star Trek. And not only were huge fans, it drove them into all sorts of different fields, whether it was technology or sociology or anthropology or whatever, to try and figure out how to improve humanity. They saw that optimistic vision inside of Star Trek and said to themselves, I want to live in that kind of future. And when they saw that future, that optimistic future, they said to themselves, how can I make that future happen? And some people went down the technology route and they said, I want to help to build that technology that was presented in that optimistic future. And others went down the sociological route or the philosophical route and said, I want to help human beings be like those human beings in that future. I want to teach people. I want to help people. I want to unite people in the same way that they were united in this optimistic future. And that's what drove me into a career in technology. And like I said, Star Trek was probably the most influential piece of media out there of like how it inspired people to get into technology, inspired people into figuring out how to take that future. That future that Gene Roddenberry invented was so compelling and so optimistic and so fantastic that we all looked at it and said, that is the future I want to live in. And many of us said, how do I build that future? How do I create that future? And it drove us into careers where we could invent that future. And that's what drove me into a career of innovation, working with companies to try and help to develop that future. But what happens next? It turns out that a lot of the stuff I was working on was technology-based. And what happened? I forgot the human. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.